right. Just rolling out of the parking lot. Steering has a good weighting to it. Not too heavy, not too light. Pretty intuitive car to drive. This particular one's a GT-Line. So automatic climate control, some nicer seats. But immediately texture noise. 17-inch wheels plus the traditional Hyundai Kia suspension development. How would you say? Shortcomings. Just something that I've been urging them to address for 15 or so years now, but not yet. So I'm taking it easy. This is a car with only 9 miles on it. Just trying to drive it like one would if they were just getting around. Some wind bluster, some wind rustle. We're only doing 40 to 45 miles an hour. So, refinement. I think refinement is not the Forte's forte. Not bad, but we're talking like where car companies were in the 90s. It seems to be where they are now. Really stiff structure. No qualms there. Interior assembly quality, great. Good sight lines. It's a traditional, 3-box sedan. But even here, I mean, there's no satisfaction to be had from what I'm doing here. I'm picking up the pace just slightly. Again, just getting around. But there's really no engagement. I mean, the gauges look like a sports sedan. The seats, they feel like a sports sedan's. Great ergonomics, like I've mentioned in another video. Really want to like this car. I think they've done a lot right with the car, but they continue to fall short on putting those finishing touches on. This is like what the Honda Civic, the 2022 Civic, probably would be like if it hadn't had additional engineering time and resource put into it. The steering just feels very wayward. Like this is a 10-mile unit, right? Doesn't really have a good sense of straight ahead. It wants to veer a bit. I'd call it torque steer, but I'm not really applying much in the way of torque. So now I'm gonna squeeze a little bit more. So it's a CVT simulating shifts. Not bad. The ratio gaps between the shifts are well judged. Hyundai Kia traditionally has had some really solid work in the powertrain engineering department when it comes to this stuff, so that doesn't surprise me. That feels pretty refined on this particular surface. But again, I feel like, I think what I might have to do is disengage any sort of lane departure that might be going on, because that could be why the car feels like it wants to veer more than I'd like it to. That could be the reason I'm just not syncing with the car. I could see if you're driving for like an Uber or Lyft and you don't want to overspend on the equipment. One thing I will say that I am liking is the brake pedal feel has a nice weighting and nice progressiveness to it. It's not snatchy. It's not spongy. I mean, this is not a Mazda. This is not a Porsche. This is not a traditional BMW by any means. But again, there are people, you can feel the efforts. You can feel it didn't just completely phone the car in, and that should be celebrated. That should be admired. That should be rewarded. I think it really comes down to steering and suspension. Those are the two fundamentally most important parts of a car to me. So when a car doesn't have steering and suspension dialed in, I lose interest very quickly. I lost interest in this car almost immediately as a potential for leasing or purchasing for a family member or friend. But again, I want to like it, and I think, you know what I think might help it is not having the 17-inch wheels, not having the GT-Line, having 16-inch alloy wheels on it. Let it have more cushion between the road surface and the cabin, and not have so much of this texture noise, intruding. But yeah, not a bad car. I'd say if you see one in the rental lot, you have one for the weekend to get you from city to city, okay, sure. If you're driving for Uber or Lyft, and this is in your budget, and you want something with a reasonably sized back seat, this is really not a bad package. But if you're someone who cares about driving, someone who wants to enjoy driving, I think there are better choices. I think the Civic does a much nicer job. If you want that large back seat and you want a kind of dialed-in driving experience, although I will say the Civic is actually a bit, I'd say, noisier in terms of surface textures and things like that. So if you're sensitive to that, it's not necessarily going to be a better choice. But Mazda 3, if you don't mind a smaller cabin and shallower windows and more of a hemmed-in sense, another enjoyable, almost luxurious car in its feeling. That's the thing about this car, is I feel like it's not quite sporty or engaging, and it's not quite comfortable. So, and maybe that's that word. That's probably the word I should use for it. Sporty, right? This reminds me of how GM used to do sporty. Kind of quick steering that causes your head to bob back and forth. Kind of quick in the throttle response. A little overly firm in the suspension. It's like the cues of being a driver's car. But if you see how this car is done against its competition in some comparison tests, I think it becomes clearer that it's sort of it's promising something it can't really keep its word on. So now I've shifted the car into sport program, trying to see if it wakes up the car at all. I'm getting more engine drone for sure, much more than I wanted. I think with a lot of these transmission programs, you end up getting more noise, but you don't necessarily get more in the sense of sport, more satisfaction, more engagement, more involvement. Personally, I'd prefer to just keep the car in drive, squeeze the pedal a little harder, have it delay up shifts based on throttle opening, or use the actual manual setting and do the ratio selection. Let's try that. That's not bad. That's actually pretty good, even though this is a CVT. It feels pretty smooth but quick. Pretty satisfying, I'd say, for someone who's not super critical of how these things can be executed like I am. I get a lot of chance to drive a lot of different cars, and I have to tell you, this is the first time I'm bothering to drive a car in this segment that's not something like a Civic or a 3 that's at the top of the pile. I was just genuinely curious because my girlfriend's car was just totaled, and I'm looking around at the sea of inventory and on something that we can just pick up short term as almost like a long-term rental. And so this came to mind as a possibility. Otherwise, I wouldn't find myself giving it the time of day. But it is always good to give everything a fair shake. So I'm glad I took the time to drive this today. It certainly could be worse. It's just it frustrates me because it feels like, given who they have working in the company and given the products that they've been putting out, I know they have the know-how. I know they have the capability to get this right. This car just makes me think they're not particularly interested in getting it right. They're just kind of interested in getting it done. So I hope this was helpful if you're in the market for this car or a car in this category. This is just me killing some time before I have to go pick up someone, and wanted to kind of scratch a curiosity's itch, I guess you'd say. Anyway, hope it's helpful, and stay safe.